Anytime someone is considering buying a watch in the $1,000 to $10,000 price range, brands like Rolex, Tudor, Omega get a lot of the attention, and there's a reason for that. There are, though, some amazing small independent watchmakers or micro brands that make incredible watches, but they all deal with the same problems. They're not the familiar name, and they don't have history. A micro brand didn't send the first watch to the moon or be on the wrist of James Bond. So it's only natural to consider watches from the big Swiss names. This is the challenge micro brands face as they compete with the giants like Rolex and the Swatch Group. Micro brands don't have much heritage or brand recognition that comes with being a long-standing watchmaker. This doesn't take away from the quality a micro brand has to offer, and in many ways, they have advantages over watches like the Submariner or the Black Bay. A lot of that comes down to how they capture our attention. In order for a small watch company to stand out, they need to offer something of value, and this comes in a variety of ways. The most obvious would be monetary value. Selling a watch that has all the great specs and features and pricing it below the competition. This is one of the big advantages micro brands have to offer. Really great value for money. The reason why micro brands are able to offer high quality, feature-packed watches at more affordable prices are their total costs are much lower than the big players. There's no big marketing budgets, distributor costs, or rents for storefronts. So they have more wiggle room with their margins because they have less overall costs. Those savings translates to our savings. A small brand that I think are doing amazing things is Baltic. They make really detailed and well-built watches that look and play the part of cool vintage style tool watches. And even more awesome is that every one of their models is well under 1K. Another small brand that is totally crushing it is Oris and their Aquis collection. On the gray market, you could buy one for under 2K, and as an Aquis owner, I could attest they're really high quality at a very attainable price. Now look, as much as I love my Rolex Submariner, it's tough to say it's worth $7,000, but with Rolex and a lot of the big Swiss brands, they make you pay a premium because they can. It is what it is. But comparing a $7,000 Rolex to a $1,200 Oris, there is much more value in the micro brand. One of the big reasons why I love micro brands is their creative designs, and that's another way that they offer value. As much as a Longines and a Rolex is beautiful, their designs play it safe. As iconic as the Submariner is, it can be considered a bit boring. Rolex has shareholders who focus on the bottom line, so it's important for them to target a wide audience by making watches that use familiar, classic designs. This is where small micro brands like Ferrer and Unimatic really shine. They make creative designs, unconventional styles that you typically don't see from the mainstream brands. Ferrer has an incredible way of blending vibrant colors together in a really appealing way. This does limit the mass appeal, but in return, we get very stylish and refreshing watches. Micro brands may not be a part of history for decades, but they make up for it with character. There's also an attention to detail that micro brands are able to focus on that really elevates their watches. Majority aren't producing in-house movements and have small production runs, so they're able to spend time and resources on a lot of the small details. Exploring different materials, using unique dial textures, and creating custom design parts. Hamilton and Tudor have limitations based on their manufacturing and tooling. Because micro brands operate on the other side of things, sourcing parts and movements, this gives them more options and flexibility. Christopher Ward's recent Lumiere release is a great example of how a micro brand is able to spend time on exploring, experimenting, and creating new innovative designs. There's also Formex, who uses a suspension case system, which basically is an innovation that integrates shock absorbers into the case, allowing it to move slightly with the wrist's natural motion. Also, with a lot of micro brands, you get a higher commitment to community engagement. Micro brands often have a very close relationship with their customers, whether this be through design and gathering feedback or crowdfunding. This creates a stronger sense of community and connection that you will not get from big watch companies. A lot of the micro brands have very loyal fan bases, and in turn, the brand has a close air to the fans to make sure they continue to evolve and build watches people will enjoy. A lot of these small micro brands are kind of like mom and pop shops in your local community. Target is great, Walmart has great deals, but there's something special about giving your money to a small business. Tissot, Hamilton, and other giants in the watch industry are driven by corporations. Nothing wrong with that, and I own watches from both of those brands, but there's something special about supporting a small mom and pop shop and knowing who your money is going towards. Even though Rolex and IWC have really rich history, a lot of that is no longer a big part of their design aesthetics. The vintage Rolex Submariners no longer look like the modern versions. Not that this is a bad thing, but the Speedmaster we get today from Omega didn't land on the moon, so heritage really only goes so far. A lot of the great micro brands have passionate founders who are also watch enthusiasts and pour their love for horology into every watch they create. This passion often translates into a product that displays a deep level of care and commitment. Rolex produces almost 1 million watches per year, and it's tough to see the same level of passion that you would see in a watch from F.P. Journe or H. Moser & C. Passion is important because it fuels motivation, creativity, and perseverance. When a watch company is passionate, they are more likely to put in the effort and time needed to excel, even when faced with challenges. We have seen countless times when passion fuels innovation, and if there's any category in watches where we see the most of it, it's definitely with Microbrands. With how aggressive the luxury watch industry has been with continued price increases, I can't help but feel the passion heavily leans on profits, which is understandable. Money is great, but at what cost to us? Not only higher prices, but paying more for something we used to get for less. Throughout this deep dive into Microbrands, I've brought up a few great examples of brands who I think are doing really a great job, and there's definitely a few more that I think is worth highlighting. Zelos is releasing some really cool designs and very robust dive watches. The Mako V3 in titanium is one that has a lot of great praise and very eye-catching. On the high ends of the spectrum, Ming is a really intriguing small watch brand releasing very experimental and unique watches. And there's also Grubel Force, who make some of the most intricately built and detailed movements you could find in the whole industry. Even though they only make a few hundred watches per year at most, and definitely considered a small independent watchmaker, they rival AP and Patek. On the other side of the range, in that $200, $300, $400 price, you shouldn't be limited to just Orient, Citizen, Seiko, and G-Shock. This is another area where Microbrands often steal the show. Islander watches make some incredibly built timepieces that are total spec monsters and built with a very close eye through each step of the process. Another is Vare, who make very straightforward and good-looking dive watches. Ultimately, it comes down to this. Small, independent watchmakers and Microbrands may not have the history, the stories to tell, the brand recognition, but they should definitely be taken seriously. I know there are a lot of other great small brands that I didn't mention, so I'm curious, what are some of your favorite Microbrands?